Hi, I'm M.
And my name is Bea.
And this is
Fangirls Anonymous. A quick warning, this podcast is not for kids.
We get into some pretty explicit stuff.
But if you're still with us and into that, welcome.
Hello! It is M!
Hello, M.
I just felt like a wizard coming out of the cave, like, hello, it is I, the wizard!
It's a good feeling.
It's a great feeling. Hi, Bea, how's it going?
It's going pretty good. You sound like you're doing great.
I am doing great. It's true. I mean, I'm a little sad because it's the last episode of season 2, but it's also, yay, the last episode of season 2, we did it! Wah, woo, wah.
The gateway to season 3, even.
Gateway to, oh yes, the gateway to season 3. That's a perfect way to describe it. We have very little podcast homework today because today is FicClub. So we don't have to talk about FicClub for the next FicClub until season 3, which is starting September 3rd, the first Saturday of September. We will all miss you in August. I'm sorry. It's gonna be okay. We're gonna have a lot of fun stuff happening in season 3. Mary Sue's, more trope times, more guests, more of the more insane shit that happens in fandom. It's gonna be great. But we do have a hiatus, so just to let you know, the next episode after today is gonna be September 3rd. But that means we don't have any FicClub right now. On September 3rd, you'll hear about the next FicClub. But we do have some podcast homework. We have a Patreon. If you want to support us, you can. It exists. It's out there. The link is in the description. We also have our podcast on Apple. And if you want to review our podcast, you can also do that. It's lovely when we get a review. It's very nice. So yeah, that's it. No more season 2 for us. Feels like I don't know, the end of a season, which is a little bit. I'm a little bit bereft. Every season has its own tone, you know. But yeah, I think season 3 is just going to be even better.
Yeah, we are coming back. I'm not going to say bigger and better because we're just better, maybe. Bigger is a strong word.
Yes. We're not really going to change anything. We're just going to continue doing the stuff we've done. Oh man. Anyway, we have a special guest today. And her name is Miss Sampo. Hi again, Miss Sampo, podcast friend.
I'm a special guest? You guys just keep me in the basement here and you pull me out whenever you needed commentary.
Well, yes, but you're a special guest.
Okay.
Yeah.
That I live in the special basement?
Yes, you'll get extra dog food.
Okay. That's worth it.
That's probably somebody's kink. But also, I think every guest is special. So, you know, you're special.
Thank you.
Yeah, and you were also our first guest. So that also makes you.
It's because I knew where you guys lived.
More special than most.
Thank you. That was not at all threatening.
Anyway, the reason why we have Miss Sampo here today is because, sadly, we did not get any emails. And that's okay. It happens. People have their lives. We fic-wrecked a almost 100,000 word fic, and who's got time for that? Okay, we understand. We're the weird ones. But we have Miss Sampo here because she has not read the fic.
I meant to, viewers. I meant to, but then I didn't.
We want to have her opinion as kind of a lay person to spice up the episode a little bit without anybody's questions. And she might have questions, right, Miss Sampo?
I mean, I'm
Wink,
sure
wink,
I can think
nudge,
of a few. Such as, what is the plot? And when do Kirk and Spock have sex?
Ooh, boy. I'm going to get into it because those are some of my favorite scenes. We will get into it. Super fun fic. And now we're getting finally into the Lotus Eaters by aldora89. Aldora89, thank you. In 2011, thank you for writing this fic. Oh my god, it's so good.
Round of podcast applause, everybody, for aldora89.
Yes, thank you, aldora89. You're the best. Hopefully they hear this and email us at mandbepresents@gmail.com.
Wink, wink.
So, this fic, there's a reason why we wrecked it. It's obviously fantastic, but it is way different than the fics that we have wrecked in the previously.
Well, I mean, they're all good, and that is a point of commonality. But other than that, yeah, it's pretty different.
Yes, I mean, almost any Spurk fic is going to be different than, like, most other pairings because they're in space.
Yeah, which, okay, I can think of one other fandom that's really space-oriented, but that's
Different.
it?
Stargate.
No, okay, thank you. Stargate is not... Okay, now I'm thinking of several. Thank you for opening the door in my brain that was apparently all of the sci-fi fandoms were hiding behind. Because I was just drawing a complete blank there for a hot minute. But, yeah, it's a different flavor of sci-fi.
It's because it's the granddaddy sci-fi.
Well, I hesitate
OG
to...
sci-fi.
Yeah, I hesitate to call it hard sci-fi. Like, there is only so much science to Star Trek. But it's definitely a harder sci-fi than, say, Star Wars, which has very
space
little
fantasy.
Yeah, it has a passing acquaintance with science, I think, but most of it is made up wholesale, and I mean that in the very best of ways. I love fantasy myself, and it's a fun and interesting world to play in. It's just there, to my knowledge, are no such thing as magic rocks that you can turn into lightsabers. I don't think that's a real thing.
You're
That's
breaking
Star
my
Wars.
heart here. You're breaking my heart here. What am I going to be doing in my 30s if not making lightsabers? What am I going to have to do instead? Woodworking? Come on.
Right.
Just write
I
more
will do
fic. Oh, man.
Chain me to the desk, why don't you?
B, I think we should probably get into the plot of this and have Miss Sampo be astounded and amazed by the plot of this fic.
Are you telling me this fic is not 100,000 words of Ponfar? How do I know this is Spurk if it's not that?
I just love Ponfar
Nor is it
fics
slice
so
of
much.
life. Sorry.
Ponfar fics are just so delicious. I love them with all my little heart. Oh my god. Okay.
This is not
I wish
that,
there was
though.
Ponfar.
Like, I guess we should caveat this. I guess this could be a draw for some people and a turn off for others. That is one trope that this fic does not go into at all.
True. I don't think it's mentioned.
I think it is mentioned obliquely and not by name. Because there is a scene very late in the story where, for reasons that will make sense once we get into it, Jim Kirk has some memories that are not his own, and he knows about the actual original series of events, sort of, because in this alternate universe of an alternate universe,
he had a brain melt.
Possibly an alternate universe, the original Kirk and Spock were in a relationship, which is neither confirmed nor denied, frankly, in the actual original series. So,
look, Leonard Nimoy knew what he was doing when he put that intonation on "I am your very best friend."
More importantly, Roddenberry knew what he was doing when he made up a word for special best friends soulmates and left it at that.
Yep.
Or when Leonard Nimoy said, "Jim!"
Yes.
It makes me so happy.
Plot. We have to focus.
Let's get into the plot. So I'm sorry. This is gonna be a really weird fic club. It's basically just three friends talking to each other about Spurk.
This is what you get for not sending us any emails, friends.
Plot. The plot of this fic. Let's get into it. So Jim and Spock, and also McCoy and a couple of people from the Enterprise go to a hailing by the Galapagos, which is a another ship that's more based around like science accumulation. It's mostly a scientific ship,
as opposed to the Enterprise, which is composed of being horny for aliens.
The Enterprise is the flagship, so it does an equal amount of... It's technically slated for diplomatic and exploratory missions, but it does its fair share of either support missions or research, sort of. Spock has his own little lab that he carries around with him and can do stuff in. And occasionally, when they are at war, it is the flagship, so it will go to war. But it's basically supposed to be the one that ship everybody looks at and goes, now that's the Federation. And it's super cool, but also it kind of isn't specialized in any way, shape, or form. So is complicated.
Look, you say all this, but when you say it's a spaceship for diplomatic and exploratory missions, that sure does sound like we're looking for sexier aliens to have sex with.
You're not wrong.
Yeah, you're really not wrong. But yeah, basically, the Galapagos had some people on its crew go missing on this on this island. Wow, on this planet.
Island, planet,
aren't
ship,
planets
spaceship.
What is a planet but an island in space?
Yeah, really. If you are able to traverse it. But yeah, basically they're on this planet. Isn't it called like Nox or something? No.
Sigma Nox.
Sigma Nox. Thank you. Sigma Nox. It's called Sigma Nox, and the people just up and left. There was no distress signal. It was very strange and mysterious, and that's what they're trying to help the Galapagos figure out. Where did these people go? Kirk, being the idiot that he is, Captain Kirk decides to stay after the sun sets. And McCoy
Always bad choice.
Yeah. And McCoy and his wonderful instincts. He has really good instincts for a person, even though nobody ever listens to him.
That is why nobody ever listens to him, because the plot would go so much smoother if they did.
It's true. McCoy tells Kirk, hey, I don't want you to staying after the sun sets, because that's when the people who went missing. And Spock's like, McCoy has a point, even though they hate each other. And Spock is talking to Nyota, and then he turns around. This is after the sun sets, and Kirk is gone. And that's the end of chapter 1.
Mm-hmm.
It's really good. That's a great ending, in my opinion. But basically, there's nothing really basically about this, because there are 14 chapters and we've barely even touched the story. So there are these things called bulb weeds. They call them bulb weeds.
They don't really have an official sciencey name, because they're making it up as they go along, because there are no inhabitants to this planet. So they just get them name things, and it's a mistake to give Kirk naming rights.
It is. It's really fun though, as a reader. So there are these things called the bulb weeds that are giant, and they're very warm apparently. Mm-hmm. They're like, in my head, they're like 30 feet tall. I think that's what they're described as.
In my head, they are basically those weird flowers from Barbie Fairytopia, except for carnivorous.
Yeah, exactly.
And also possibly vaguely eldritch.
They're very eldritch horror. Very colorful.
Mm-hmm.
That would have made Fairytopia so much better.
Yeah, if they were especially if the fairies were some kind of like symbiotic plant,
like a clownfish in an anemone. Look, I think we got something. We need to write Mattel.
Yeah, I feel like there's like a type of lizard or something that lives in certain pitcher plants. Anyway,
back to aliens.
I don't even want to know about that. So, this whole planet is so fucking weird. And the person who wrote this fic, aldora89, just chef's kiss, did such a good job at creating a really interesting biodiverse planet. Like, they did such a good job on it. Oh,
you're saying
my God.
It's not just a planet of one desert like Vulcan?
Yeah.
More importantly, it's not a planet with one species like all of the original series.
Yeah. One plant and one species. That is what most planets got in the original series. But the person who wrote this fic really did a great job of diversifying all of these different animals and cohabitants in a single space together, a single world. The ecosystem is really vast, and they are able to like really detail it. It's great. But so there are these bulb weeds that are giant and have these kind of pheromones in the surrounding space that only work at night. And if you have a particular like biochemistry in your self, then you will like get inundated by these pheromones, basically roofied, and you will kind of like a zombie try and go towards these bulb weeds, and the bulb weeds will eat you.
If you need a visual, imagine those ants that get infected by that weird brain fungus that like makes them wander around just aimlessly until a mushroom pops out of their head. Yeah, kind of like
Yeah.
that, except for it's not
With
a
no
mushroom
mushrooms.
and it doesn't eat you from the inside. It just wants you to be its slave.
So wait, like a Venus flytrap?
It makes you want to be its slave.
Yeah, think about the dragon from How to Train Your Dragon, how they were just like, you are all my little hive workers and you will go out and get me things.
Yes,
So it's not like a Venus
exactly.
flytrap. Because I'm like, that sounds like a plant we have in real life. The Venus flytrap attracts
Nope.
flies with tasty smells.
No, it's not. It's not like that. It's like Jim, for a really long time, until they realize if they get far enough away from a bulbweed, then Jim doesn't have to deal with it anymore. For a really long time, Jim has this constant compulsion to go to the bulbweed.
He basically becomes an addict.
Yes, and they use that word in the fic.
Mhm.
The author does, which is interesting to me, because it's not. I don't know. Yeah, he basically becomes an addict without like wanting to be an addict. Obviously, it's like forced addiction.
Involuntary, but the behavior is the same.
Yeah, and Spock luckily does not have to deal with it because his
Lucky Vulcan.
biochemistry is different than a human's. Obviously,
he can pull out his Vulcan get out of jail free card from his pocket.
Mm-hmm.
essentially, but like it makes sense because I mean it makes more sense that a human would be susceptible to pheromones than a Vulcan, in my opinion. Just from what I know about Vulcan, like, you know, biology.
I just
and stuff.
like the fact that they kind of pulled an Uno reverse from the actual original series, which always seems to be like, and this weird thing happened to Vulcans and they became mindless. And
it's
I'm
true.
Like, okay. And this time they're like, no, the Vulcan's fine. Don't worry about the Vulcan. Now
reverse,
the human.
Reverse. But yeah.
Take it back now, y'all.
So so obviously the Enterprise was hanging up there and like in space trying to get them when Kirk was like basically attacked by the bulbweed, and another ship comes in, guns a blazing, and makes the Enterprise go away.
Chases them off.
It chases them off. So Kirk and Spock are left alone on this planet, and they have no idea how to get off because all of their equipment has been fried since Kirk had their equipment on him, and when he went into the bulbweed, it got all messed up, and they aren't able to hail anybody, and it's a whole thing.
So when he went into the bulbweed, did it give him a bath? Was he being digested? Or
a little of column A, a little of column B. They also may have been indoctrinating them into their weird bulbweed cult through the power of disgusting ooze, belly juice baptism.
Yeah, we haven't even talked about the Beatles.
No, there are also Beatles.
They invited the Beatles to this?
Yes!
That's my least favorite kind of music.
Oh, I don't think we can be friends now anymore, Miss
I was
Sampo.
joking.
The Beatles are so boring.
I don't actually listen to the Beatles.
Ugh,
at all.
You need to listen to the Beatles. So the Beatles are a species that, I don't know, they're kind of symbiotic, but the Beatles have there's no like look into their eyes and they're empty.
Yeah, they are just little hive workers.
Yes, they're like there's nothing there anymore in the Beatles' brains, because of all of the pheromones affecting them for a long time.
Mm-hmm.
And that's kind of a thing that's hanging over Spock's head. Like, what if Jim is getting affected by these pheromones like too much, you know? And this is weeks and weeks, months that they're on this planet. I think, isn't it like a year or something? Like,
it's not a year, but it's a considerable chunk of time.
Yes, it's not just a couple weeks. It's like months and months.
Also space time, and because they're on a different planet, the days work slightly differently.
Yeah.
So the actual amount of time is somewhat confusing.
It is. It's somewhat, and even to them, it's confusing. Like, which is fun. So the first couple chapters are of just them trying to survive, figuring out what food they can eat, what water they can drink. The different animals.
What exactly is making Jim briefly lose his entire mind?
During the night. And pretty quickly, Jim becomes pretty weak. So Spock has to really take care of him, which Hurt Comfort is my favorite. I am a whore for it.
Are you saying in this fic, Kirk becomes a fainting Victorian maiden and Spock must carry him?
Just a little.
For like 2 chapters.
They're long chapters.
They are, but
That
it's
is
kind of fun for a couple
classic
chapters.
Star Trek. Does Kirk also lose his shirt?
Yes, or at least there is at least one scene where he is not in his shirt. I am 100% sure.
Okay,
Yes.
that fills the quota of the original series.
Yeah, that's true. Anyway, so okay, that happens. They're finally they figure out, like, they have figured out all of the food situation. Spock starts having these weird doubts about himself because every time he kills something, he gets this like killer's high, and he's like, "Oh my god, am I becoming a terrible person?"
Especially because that's against the teachings of Sarek, which is their Vulcan religion, is they are vegetarians. They do not kill things to eat, but he has to because they have a limited amount of things that Jim can eat and still be like strong enough to survive, and that he is strong enough to survive. So he has to kill and eat things, which is there. That exception is allowed in the teaching of Sarek because it is logical to do what you have to survive, but He has a little ancient Vulcan in the back of his brain that really enjoys him doing this, and he's just not sure if they can be friends.
That Vulcan is not invited to parties, but he keeps showing up.
Yeah, and that comes into play a little bit later. So they have made this hut for themselves, right, in the first two, and it's only when it rains that Jim is actually able to sleep at night, and they finally figure out maybe we should try to get away from the bulbweed.
We have this terrible substance affecting our physical and mental stability. Maybe we should leave.
Yeah, and they get out and they start leave. They finally leave, and Jim gets so much better now that he's able to actually sleep and eat and not go insane.
It's like me at college.
Oh man. They get out and they find that life is infinitely better. And then they stumble upon this underground tunneled area that has paintings and drawings of a species that they have not seen on the planet. Like big murals that a really advanced species would have had to make,
or at least one capable of really complicated abstract thought.
Exactly. It's like almost religious iconography, the stuff that they're seeing in these underground tunnel domes areas. It's really very beautiful the way that aldora89 wrote it. But it's a mystery. They have no idea how this is on this planet where seemingly the beings that they have seen are just very they're
primitive,
completely overtaken by the bulbweed, or they are incredibly animalistic and there's nothing.
Yeah, they're primitive creatures.
They're incredibly primitive. Seemingly. And Jim gets pretty obsessed with it, but then,
Oh, they have to move on eventually, because the place they find the murals is not outside of the bulbweed's influence, really.
Not outside of the weed zone.
Yeah, it's they have to go still.
So they keep going, and they are camped somewhere. Jim is slowly but surely getting better with the exercise, the more consistent food.
The lack of constantly being hotboxed by the local flora.
Yes.
Exactly. Yes. And Spock goes out and almost gets killed by a giant praying mantis creature type thing that is terrifying. And the only reason why he survives is because Jim was following him.
Yes.
Sorry, what?
Just the giant praying mantises they discover the top of the food chain unequivocally.
I mean, to be fair, if praying mantises were bigger on this Earth, I'm pretty sure they would be a lot less eaten by the local cats.
Yeah, fair.
Especially the women praying mantises.
Yes.
Yeah. And for context, I feel like this praying mantis was described as being basically T-Rex sized, and also completely willing and able to kill you.
That is a big boy man.
And has an incredibly fast, elongating neck.
Yes.
Which is terrifying.
That's the only way you could make a praying mantis worse.
Yes. And aldora89 figured it out.
I salute you, aldora89.
You looked at praying mantises and went, but what if Yo-Yo?
What if killer giraffe?
Yes, what if killer giraffe? Oh god. So the only reason why Spock survives is because Kirk was following him. Because sometimes when Spock is just going around hunting and trying to find water, a water source, Jim just goes out and goes to a different direction to explore or follow Spock. And at that time, luckily, he decided to follow Spock.
Dear diary,
And,
today I stalked my first officer again. No,
Abandonment
I was not
issues?
high at the time.
Separation anxiety? What separation anxiety?
No, actually, though, if you only had one other person on a crazy ass planet, then I would also have separation anxiety. I understand Jim very much so.
But also, it's just, Kirk, what are you doing here?
I happen to be in the area.
That's actually what happened.
No way!
Mm-hmm.
What was his
It
excuse?
was really
He had to tell the truth.
he just told him what he does. Yeah.
No, unfortunately.
Spock was really mad.
Yeah.
As Spock does. I'm sure he was super logical about it and not at all having feelings heart attacks.
No.
Oh.
Spock was trying to hoard all of the danger for himself, and Kirk was having none of it.
Stealing it from his
Seriously.
hands.
So it's around this time that they meet a character that is, I would say, unequivocally the best character in the fic.
Mm-hmm.
Would you agree with me, B?
She is certainly the most entertaining. Like, it's kind of a low bar on the planet, considering she's the only other sentient creature they meet. But
I don't know. Obviously, I love Spock and Kirk, but like Longclaw is seriously my favorite OC of all time in Sparkfic.
There is charm to being a straight man, even if you're not a straight man in a story.
I don't know if I would call her a straight man.
she does
She's
kind of
not
play
smart
straight man
enough.
to their shenanigans on more than one occasion, though.
Right, kind of, but like, okay.
She's the one who's like, "This is very dumb, Jim Kirk," and Spock
Jim
is
Kirk.
like, "Yeah," and Spock is like, "Yes, I agree," and immediately does the thing anyway.
Yeah.
Because Spock is whipped.
Yes.
So Longclaw is a semi-sentient.
Well, she's 100% sentient.
Or-
She's just not very smart.
She's sapient.
Yes.
She's a sapient, big, fast, kind of Komodo
Lizard.
dragon lizard looking.
I think we should
person,
just stick
like,
with
being.
lizard because we've discussed prior to the podcast that I have a very different visual image of her than you do, but we agree that she's
Yeah.
reptilian.
She's incredibly reptilian. I think she has a long snout with
Mhm.
like long tongue and just looks like a big lizard, like Komodo dragon in my head. But she's fast and big.
Yeah, in my brain, she's just like a really weirdly configured crocodile.
I'm going to picture her as an Argonian.
She's just a smooth crocodile in my head.
I'm going to see her as an Argonian.
Okay.
It's going to be
Perfect.
hilarious.
And Longclaw is of a species that was left on the planet. So she's part of a species where there are battle sisters.
Mm-hmm.
There are fighters and then there are thinkers.
Yeah, and she's a fighter.
Is it called fighter or warrior? I can't remember.
Point being,
I think it's fighter.
it's a what is the word I'm looking for? It's a fractionated society in which they have a symbiotic relationship in highly specialized roles, and hers was not.
It's dichotomous.
Yeah, hers was not to think. Hers was to do
Yeah.
what she was told. So it's kind of unclear exactly who or why or how she ended up there, other than her species came there at some point and she was left behind.
No, she was the final. All of the rest of the people who came with her, all of the rest of her species who came with her died.
Yes, but like
That's what happened.
yeah, but didn't she say something about it being like a party of people that were sent to like colonize or explore the planet? Like she isn't native.
I don't remember that. She's not a native.
Which means she must have come there at some point with her species.
Yeah. I don't know why they came originally.
No, nobody
but all of them
really does.
died.
Yes.
Yeah.
Again, she doesn't explain this well. This is not
No, because she's not a thinker.
No, and so this is not just us not remembering the fic well. This is literally the character
Yeah.
never really explained.
And it's great. I
Mhm.
know this sounds like super annoying, but it's really great because you kind of get this like incredibly straightforward brain
Mm-hmm.
in amongst two very complex brains. And you just get these really fun conversational give and takes between all three of them. And it makes the fic So good. So Longclaw is good at hunting, really is good at finding water because she is a great smeller. Okay, Bea, you go ahead and give us the rest of the fic.
The whole time that all of this has been happening, they've kind of been trying to brainstorm their way into, okay, if we can't figure out how to get out, can we get a signal out that we're still down here and need help? Because, like she said at the beginning, Kirk disappeared and the people from the Galapagos disappeared, and some other crewmen that Kirk had been with disappeared.
No, red
and
shirts.
So they basically at this point are among the disappeared. Nobody knows that they're still down there and need help. So they're like, we gotta get a signal out so that maybe they'll send a party again to try and grab us before they get chased off. And so this whole time they've been trying to think about this, and part of the reason they leave is because of the bulbweed, and part of the reason is because they're like, wait a minute, the Galapagos crash landed here. It fell out of the atmosphere. That actually happens during the fic. It was abandoned and lost, and it fell out of the atmosphere, and they're like, wait, what if there's something we can use in the crash? So they basically go on a quest to go get the Galapagos, and they run into Longclaw, and Longclaw is like, well, I literally have nothing better to do, and you seem pretty smart, so I'm going to follow you. And they're like, awesome, great, a new party member.
She also wants to get into, or she also wants to get off the planet. She does not want to stay on the planet any longer.
Again, not native, doesn't like it here, and she's lonely because she has battle sisters that were all lost. She's kind of a she's definitely someone who works better in a group, and she is all alone and sad.
Oh, no.
So
now she has 2 gay dads.
Yes, well, actually, more like 2 gay roommates that she kind of is exasperated by.
Yes. Wait, can I read a quote that I have of
Yes.
this fic? It's really good.
Do share.
Okay, so this is talking about Longclaw. This is from chapter 8. But while the escort was knowledgeable, her thought processes remained highly simplistic and erratic at best. One night, Spock caught her staring at him across the fire for a disturbingly long time. He ignored her for 5.6 minutes, at which point his curiosity demanded he take action. What is it? Do all of your females have pointed ears? He thought about the best way to address a question with such an outrageously inaccurate premise, but he reconsidered and chose the most basic possible. I am male. She turned to Jim and tilted her head to the side. Then you are female. Spock recognized Jim's tight grin as an attempt to suppress laughter. No, we're both male. She peered at him skeptically. We are from 2 different peoples, Spock offered to clarify the issue. Her eyes narrowed in amusement. Are stupid. Same except for ears and silly fluff on heads. She studied Spock again. Must be female. Are taller. I assure you, I am... But by that point, Longclaw had lost interest in what remained of her dinner, and wandered down a nearby slope to patrol. Jim snorted beside him, then burst into outright laughter. Sorry, he gasped. I was blinded by her logic. She has spent 5.3 days in our presence, uncertain of our sexes, Spock said, unable to curb his frown of bewilderment. She is not terribly inquisitive. Nope, Jim grinned at the spot Longclaw had occupied. I like it. She's all right.
Is gender stored in the ear? Question mark?
Longclaw with the meme of all of the Pythagorean theorems. You are the same people? Like, I don't get it.
I mean, to be fair, she does have a point. They do not look very alien.
No.
Because they are literally the same, except one had the most minimalist of makeup put on him because he was a main character in the cast, and they didn't want to have to make him go through too much stuff or else he'd quit.
Yep.
True.
Yeah. So, Longclaw is hilarious.
My favorite character immediately. Amazing.
See, 2 for 2.
As a tall girl.
So they are going on this quest to go to the downed spaceship, and as they do so, they end up going... The region that they're in is very forested and very mountainous, and where they think the Galapagos lands, because Spock does a whole bunch of math, is on this mountain. So they have to climb up, and as they climb up, they realize that the bulbweed doesn't grow above a certain altitude, and so Jim is free of its influence when they get above the tree line, basically, which is good for them because that's where they're headed. So they get up there, and they have a really excellent... It's, I think, almost a chapter where they are trying to figure out how to get to the Galapagos because it crash landed in the middle of hot springs. And not like hot springs you can bathe in, hot springs like Yellowstone hot springs. You'll boil to death. And it's volatile, and it's just it's geysers everywhere too because it's super unstable ground. And it's just there in the middle of it. But they're like, it's a spaceship. It's made to withstand extreme temperatures. Because in Star Trek, I believe spaceships can enter and exit atmosphere, at least a little bit. Don't quote me on that, though. I could be wrong. Point being, it can at least withstand the vacuum of space, right? So it's got to have pretty good insulation. So they're like, so if the hull is intact, then we'll be able to get in and get electronics if we can get to it. So they spend a long time planning and thinking and figuring out a way, basically, to...
Parkour their way over?
No, to get Spock across, because Spock, being a Vulcan, is more heat-resistant. But to do it, they need, basically, a fireproof suit. And they discover, much to their horror, there is only one creature on the planet that is sufficiently fireproof.
The praying mantis.
The praying mantis. The enormous eat-your-face-off praying mantis.
Sounds like a boss battle.
Yeah, so Spock and Longclaw are like, well, they live down next to the bulbweed, so Jim can't come. And Jim is like, home. Excuse me! But also agrees that maybe he shouldn't. Does this stop him? I guess we'll see. And they are going to go off to hunt a giant T-Rex-sized praying mantis that wants to eat their faces off. But it gets worse. Because they're going after one that they'd seen before, the really big T-Rex-sized one, and Longclaw's like, okay, this one, not that one. I think we can kill this one. And Spock is like, well, what about the other one? And she says, yeah, the females are bigger and meaner. So what do you think happens?
They fight the female.
They end up fighting the female. Because they miss their chance with the first one, I think because Jim screws it up.
James.
So... they have to go after... they sort of stumble into going after the female, and it doesn't go well, and in a lot of different ways, and Spock has to save Jim at that point by going, like, full Hulk on this thing. It's an excellent battle sequence, really tense. So, if you like awesome, well-tensioned adventures, this is kind of the high point.
It's so good, and the hurt comfort after the battle is... chef's kiss, choice, grade A, hurt comfort.
It has a Jackie Chan kung fu fight with the T-Rex bug.
Yes. And they don't come out with it entirely unscathed, but they do get out of it, all of them. So
but do they have enough bug bits?
Yes, they have enough bug bits, and they build their fireproof suit, and Spock does a whole dramatic walk across the thing to find that the hull has been busted open, and the whole thing is an oven. Everything is fried, is dead.
No!
And they're back to square one. And they're kind of at this point resigning themselves to the idea that maybe they're just stuck here. Maybe this is it. But they're like, you know what? We might as well keep going. We might as well try and find somewhere in this big high mountain range that is at least a good place to live. So they're kind of going along, and Longclaw's leading them, and they're just wandering. And Jim kind of like looks in the distance and squints and goes, hey, does that look like a cave to you? And Spock squints in the distance and goes, yeah, it kind of does. And they're like, you know what? We have nothing better to do. Let's go explore the cave.
I'm sure nothing lives there.
And nothing does live there because it's like a weird cave. They're like, that's a really odd... like, they stare at it, look at it sideways. They're like, is that a... yeah, that looks like somebody built that. And there's a cave.
Can I pause you for just a second? I want to, just say that throughout all of this that we have talked about already through the plot, there are lots of different moments of them slowly falling in love with each other.
I mean, I assumed so, but also I'm here for the plot.
Yeah, that is...
we'll get through the plot, and we'll talk about that later, but I needed to just...
I'll just picture that every single story beat you say, there's an implicit pause where you take a breath, and in that breath, it is... and then Kirk and Spock have lots of crazy sex and have so many emotions at each other. It's crazy, you guys. They basically propose every single chapter. That's how I'm picturing it.
They don't.
What's cool about... yes, it's incredibly slow burn, but
then how am I going to read
what's cool about this fic is that it's in Kirk's perspective and it's in Spock's perspective. So you get to see these little oh no, oh god, I'm falling in love with you moments from both of them. And
I guess that's okay.
It's nice. It's really, really nice. But okay, continue on, B.
Yes.
That's what's up with these weird unnatural looking caves.
So they go in and they find a space a lot like the space they'd found before with all of these big murals, but bigger. And as they sort of dig into it and explore, they realize that this wasn't just advanced enough for murals, this was an advanced civilization. They have a spaceship.
Oh, they found Atlantis!
And they start trying to figure it out and decode it, and they realize, as time goes on, and here's the big spoiler for the plot, y'all, that the creatures who had been making these murals, who had created these super advanced things, are the weird beetles that now serve the bulbweed plants and are just brainless. That at some point in the past, they had been intelligent enough to create a spaceship, which is all fine and good, except for they're beetle-shaped. And humans are not beetle-shaped.
Neither are Vulcans.
No.
And I assume neither is their lizard daughter.
No. And importantly...
lizard best friend.
The two most important things are, one, they do not have 6 limbs, which is important for the piloting of this craft. And 2, they don't have omnidirectional eyes, which is important for the piloting of this craft. So they have a spaceship.
They have to all stand back to back and have all their arms sticking out.
And
then...
Wait for it.
Oh no.
So they find a spaceship, and they manage to get it to work. They manage to piece it together from lots of other kind of dead spaceships, because these things have been abandoned for a long time. They don't know how long, but a long time. And they manage to sort of piece it together and get it to work and sort of figure out enough of the language to know how it works. And then they have to figure out how to pilot. So they're like, it'll just be a crazy elaborate dance, right? And we'll just practice a lot and it'll be super choreographed. And this doesn't work, partly because they need to be doing things so fast, because Spock needs to be calculating trajectories and minute movements, and he's the one who memorized how all the various controls work. And partly because Longclaw does not communicate well verbally at all. Like, she's really fast, but she's really good at memorizing coordinated movements, but she can't do things spontaneously. She can't think through it. So Spock proposes a solution, and the solution is he will mind meld all of them together into a single mini-eyed, mini-limbed being for the period it takes them to pilot this ship.
I'm sure that won't have any long-lasting consequences.
Oh, that is not the long-lasting consequence in this fic, but yeah, that was my thought too. Was intimate mental contact for long periods of time.
With the love of your life and also your lizard friend.
Just a friend.
Just a friend.
Oh, the lizard lady is just a friend.
Yeah,
I know,
really
but still, it's a lizard. That's very different between a Vulcan and a human.
Yeah. So,
yeah.
Again, this author does tension so well, because just like with the Galapagos, where you're like, will they, won't they? This is like the end of The Martian, where you're like, will he make it? And
I freaking love that book.
Yeah,
oh my gosh.
This is them, you rooting for them, but going, I don't know if they're going to make it, because this is such a long shot. They need to be able to break atmosphere without dying on a ship they cobbled together from an alien species that they're ill-equipped to fly, doing the world's weirdest dance, well, mentally tied together. So weird. Like, you're like, there's no way, but then it's James Kirk, so yes way. And so they kind of take their lives in their hands, and they're like, we're either going to give it a shot or we're going to die trying, and that's the way it is. And they break atmosphere. They manage, after a little bit of a rough start, to get out, and they're like, we're going to get out, we're going to send a signal, we're going to try and find the Enterprise, because she's got to still be there. So they do that, but of course, the ships that initially chased the Enterprise away didn't just disappear.
Looming over the horizon.
Yeah, so they're outracing them, and the Enterprise can't initially really tell who or what they are, other than that they're definitely being pursued, exit pursued by a bear. And so I believe Scotty is in charge at this point, and Scotty kind of squints, and he's like, that's Jim. And basically, is like, you know what? We're gonna pick him up. We're gonna do it. Like, screw Starfleet, we're doing it. And through some amazing trick maneuvering on behalf of every pilot in the scenario, Sulu included, they kind of do a little scoop maneuver, and they zip into the shuttle bay, and the Enterprise is gone. And of course, at this point, they sort of break apart, and they stumble out, and everybody's like, yay, you're alive! And they're like, ha, ha, yeah, we're alive.
We will never be the same.
Yeah, they will never really be
No.
the same. Like,
Yes, but also they had crazy brain stuff going on, so.
Yeah, and also one of them is an addict, sort of in recovery. How does one recover from a drug that one does not understand?
Also, one of them is a lizard.
Yeah. So they get back on the Enterprise, and all of them sort of take a breath and are like, whoa, I don't know what to do now. Because now...
the shift between fighting for your life and suddenly you're safe is incredibly quick in this.
Mm-hmm.
But that's exactly what it's like when you're just getting, like, saved, to me.
1 minute
It's
you're in
amazing.
danger, and then you're not. And then your brain is like,
yeah.
reboot.
Yeah.
Yeah, the way that aldora89 was able to write that it's so good.
Yeah.
It's so good. Ugh.
There's definitely a weird stall in all of the characters where they try and sort of shift from life or death mode back into as per normal mode, which is not stress-free by any means. And then, of course, there's the fact that Spock isn't doing so hot because he just spent the last however long, making sure Jim was okay and making sure they could all survive and kind of being the provider.
Orchestrating a 3-way brain orgy.
And basically being the person who stepped up and made ends meet. And then there's Jim, who is addict, sort of in recovery, who is now being thrust in this role of command where he's sort of expected to perform, and his support system is completely different now. And he's not adjusting well. Neither of them adjust well. Like, Spock is just a little bit too much all up in his business, and Kirk is a little bit too much like, no, I'm fine. Nothing is wrong. You definitely don't need to be here at all ever. Nope, I'm good alone.
Longclaw, on the other hand, is doing great.
Sort of. Longclaw,
she is.
They basically are like, what is her talent? Does she want to be part of the Federation? And she's like, boy, howdy do I. And they're like, so you're good at fighting. And she's like, yep, excellent, best at fighting. And they're like, cool, so you can be security. And she's like, ooh, that sounds like fun. What do I do? And they're like, well, there's a manual and rules. And then they have to figure out how to get a reptile who doesn't really read or cognate on a certain level to read the manual for how to be a security officer.
And then they have to figure out how to make a red shirt that will fit her.
Well, yes, there is that too.
That was pretty quick, actually. She got a red shirt on real quick.
But basically, she's doing great. She's like, excellent,
she
perfect.
Is.
I have a job.
I have purpose again.
I have people to talk to who enjoy my company. Like, the life is good.
Really sweet.
Well, our
Claw's
two love interests are not doing so hot, and are still trying to pretend that they are in fact doing so hot.
The essence of the "this is fine" image.
Basically. They also don't have a whole ton of questions, and they aren't willing to divulge some of the things because, like, Kirk wouldn't be allowed back in captain's seat if they were just like, hey, I definitely got plant roofied several times over the last couple of months and am somewhat in fear for the permanent damage to my psyche. Yeah,
I also murdered somebody.
We didn't get to that. I'm going back because I actually really enjoy that scene. I know that sounds
Me
weird,
too.
but
That's an interesting thing to drop. Did that happen before the dinosaur bug or after?
Before. And I'm going to return to that because it's not plot relevant, but it's emotionally relevant. So anyway,
really
as you might be able to tell, neither of our two beloved idiots are super great at this whole we're fine balancing act. For a number of reasons, and of course all of the plates come crashing down. And Kirk in specific kind of has he has a breakdown. Just complete break. And so, after much conversation and agonizing, basically, they're like, the only thing that we can do to kind of try and save your butt here is we're going to have you go on away for a bit. I forget what they call it. It's basically a sabbatical. They're like, you need to go.
You have all these
figure
vacation
your
days,
stuff
Kirk.
out.
Use them.
And Spock, of course, goes with him. So they end up in Spock's father's house on New Vulcan, which is sort of in the middle of nowhere, and it's isolated, and it's Vulcan primitive, so like there's a very limited amount of electricity. You're supposed to be one with nature, which is mostly desert. And
then Spock shows up with his boyfriend and is like,
yes.
Dad, can we crash on your couch?
Basically. We need to get away from Starfleet for a while.
For a couple weeks at least.
Yeah, because the other thing that I forgot to touch on earlier is part of Kirk's bulbweed addiction, and this is a little technical, so please know that this may be confusing if you didn't watch the new movies. So in the 2009 Star Trek film, they bring in some interesting little cameo meta plot in which the Spock from the original TV show, who in this case is in a timeline of his own, ends up getting sent to the movie's timeline, which is different, and gets stuck there. And at one point, in order to have that Jim Kirk sort of believe him and accept his help, he ends up initiating a mind meld where he sort of explains in brief his life with his Kirk to establish some trust. In this fic, this happens before all of this, but when Kirk gets inundated with bulbweed pheromones, something funky happens, and apparently he had received like a lot more memories than he thought he had from that Spock, the old Spock. And suddenly he's got all of these memories in his brain that are not his memories. They're Spock's memories, and eventually he finds out a lot of them were the other Kirk's memories, which makes it really hard for him to differentiate in his brain who he is versus who these alternate versions of themselves were, and whether or not he actually loves Spock or it's an echo from these other people's relationship. So that's part of his breakdown at this point too, is he's losing sense of self because he's got a whole lot going on in there. And he hasn't told anybody at all about this.
Of course, why would he?
No. So in order to try and like calm his confusion and get a handle on his addiction and these memories, Spock teaches him to meditate the Vulcan way to kind of calm and organize his mind. And that's part of this Vulcan sabbatical, is Spock teaching him how to be calm, basically. This, of course, is where a lot of the relationship building ends up, because you literally just have the two of them, and they're safe for once, and they're just trying to sort of sort themselves out and get better. And so
then they fall in love and have a bunch of sex, and then the end of the story.
Yeah, that is basically what happens.
There we go. There's what everyone's here for.
It basically is the emotional culmination. The only other important thing that kind of happens, other than, they actually culminate their relationship, woohoo, is that Kirk makes the decision that having all of these memories of an alternate life in his head is really messing him up. So he goes to a special Vulcan mind priest and is basically like, could you just get rid of them, please? And they're like, yes. Sure, we can do that. So he's like, okay, cool. Wait, I need to write something down. And he writes something down. He's like, okay, cool. Now you can do it. And the thing he wrote down was, do you still love Spock? And he does. It wasn't an echo of these other people. Yeah. Of all the various things he could have written down, that was what he chose. So then, of course, they're all better, and they're like, okay, we're gonna go back to the Enterprise now. And Spock asks in a very Vulcan way to, like, please, since this is a very new thing for them, could we just keep this a secret for a minute? And Kirk is like, that's super dubious. Yes, of course. Since you ask very nicely.
Oh, man.
Yeah. So
and that's the end of the fic.
Yes. And since we touched on it, I think we should start by going back to the whole murder thing.
The whole murder thing. Let's do it.
That thing that happens.
So, before they meet Longclaw, before they sort of figure out that they need to get... They're on their way to getting away from the bulbweed. They run into one of their crew members that had disappeared, and they realized sort of after the fact that they had all been affected by the bulbweed. I think actually they had retrieved one, and that was sort of part of the impetus to go down, was because they got one and he died. And so they find another one, and he's just gone, like brainless, doesn't know what's going on, kind of gibbering. And they're like, maybe if we get them far enough away, just like with Kirk, maybe we can do something about it. So they sort of put him on a leash and try and get him away, and it reaches a point where they realize that he's a liability and they can't keep giving him resources, and he's not doing well, like he's just dying anyway. And so basically Kirk has to face the moral dilemma of, is it more merciful to kill him? And he comes to the conclusion that yes it is. So he ends up doing that, knowing that well, there are some rules in Starfleet for this kind of thing. It's really ethically dubious, and it could get him in some really hot water, and basically they can never tell anyone that he did this. And it's tragic
with your boyfriend.
because they can never really give this crewman the recognition and burial he deserves. They can only do what they can do, and he's probably just going to mostly be lost on this planet. The thing about it that really struck me is the literary parallel to kind of the way Frodo treats Gollum. The idea that, okay, yeah, he's past saving. It's over. He is the extreme of what you could become. But the hope inside that you keep dragging along with them, that if I ever got this far, maybe I could. You know, it's not so much about saving them. It is about saving them. But it's also about saving yourself. Like, you know,
yeah,
there's still hope for me.
God.
And the reaching conclusion that if you ever did get this bad, there would be no hope. It is a slippery slope. And as much as it hurts, the gentler thing to do is to just end it at a certain point. And it's not a happy message. It's not even a nice message. But it's interesting.
He's in a coma at that point, so it's like he's already about to die.
Mm-hmm.
The best thing to do for him is to just give him a merciful death and then bury him. Like,
and one could argue that he really wasn't there anyway. Like, as soon as you go into the bulbweed and like you're kind of done. Like, Jim is a special exception.
I was about to say, didn't Jim go into the bulbweed?
It's a difference between
Jim did.
Yeah,
but Spock Supermaned him out.
Yes.
And he was only in there for like
sexy.
5 minutes at most.
Mm-hmm.
I know.
As opposed to...
He was only in there for like 5 minutes at most, and everybody else that they have encountered was in there for conceivably a whole night.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. So it's...
And Kirk was in a rough way. So it's like, yeah.
So it's 1 part stomach juice, 1 part brain-destroying acid trip, literally.
Yes. Uh-huh. You get it.
It was actually scary reading it. You're like, what is happening?
For something that is just a plant, you kind of look at it and you're like, well, that's terrifying. I hate it.
Thanks, I hate it.
Also, plants aren't supposed to be warm. It was incredibly
warm.
They
are if you put them in sunshine.
Sure, but it's at night. They touched it at night. It's like,
ooh, that has some excellent body horror potential of just the flesh.
Yes, it's incredibly Lovecraftian.
Yeah. There's also the fact that you really don't know how sentient these things are, because throughout the whole fic, it's 100% characterized as knowing what it's doing and having an agenda.
I mean, how sentient do you have to be?
You don't really
when you're a plant and your designations are nutrients, photosynthesize, pollinate.
Yeah, it definitely ups the creep factor when you're like, okay, does it have an agenda? Is it sentient at least as much as, like, the mantis are? Which the mantis are not affected by the bulbweed. They don't like them. They will stay away from them, which was another whole problem they had. Because you could stay away from the mantises by being near the bulbweed, or you could stay away from the bulbweed but get attacked by the mantises.
Yeah, super fun.
But
love that for them.
It super creepy. Which, well done on aldora89's part, because yes. You spend the whole story in this state of, like, vaguely horrified tension where you're like, I want them to succeed, but this is a really terrible planet.
Oh my god. We forgot to say, the whole planet is, like, shades of red and orange. It is not a regular forest that we would consider. The tree leaves, the trees themselves, the dirt, plants, various plants, even some animals, obviously, because they want to be able to, like, blend in with the fauna or the flora, are all red.
That just adds to the body horror, because not only are there warm flesh plants, but they're the color of blood.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. Even the sky, I think, right, is red?
Can't remember. Sounds right.
I can't remember either. But it's not blue. Let's just put it that way.
Yeah.
That does have some implications for the amount of oxygen content, I think. Because isn't it the oxygen?
True, luckily they were able to
Well, it has atmospheric
survive.
implications. The lower layer that they breathe might be a decent amount of nitrogen, oxygen.
Gotcha. I don't know anything about anything science, podcast listeners, so if I ever say, I don't think science scans, assume I don't know what I'm talking about, because I definitely don't.
So, let's talk more about the romance of this fic a little bit, besides just the plot. And I wanted to say this quote that I found about Spock and Kirk talking about their favorite colors with each other. So this is from chapter 4, earlier in the fic, because the fic's only 14 chapters. And when I say only, all of the chapters are incredibly long. So
yeah, this is still.
It could have been.
Isn't this fic 100,000 words and some?
Yeah.
No, it's like 93K. So, what's your favorite color? And don't you dare say red or orange because I think I might hit you. It would be illogical to prefer a particular electromagnetic wavelength over another for purely aesthetic purposes. It almost surprised Spock how automatic his own answer was. No, see, that's not how it works. Here, I'll go first. My favorite is green, because that's the color trees are supposed to be. I used to like red, but then, a vague gesture at their surroundings, and Spock was fairly confident that he did. Even so, this topic was fundamentally frivolous. I do not understand the purpose, Mr. Spock. You are a stubborn man, Jim interrupted, smiling at him. I respect that, but I'm going to win this one way or another, so humor me. If you had to pick, imagine someone's holding a phaser to your head, if that helps. Spock decided not to pursue his curiosity by the scenario that Jim's final sentence would necessitate. Blue, he said, after a moment's pause. He kept his gaze fixed on the pile of melon rinds. I guess you lucked out in the uniform department, Jim chuckled. The irregular scraping rhythm of metal on wood stopped for a moment. How come? He had an answer, even though he had never contemplated the question before. It was not something he was eager to share, but he decided to indulge the captain for the sake of his mental well-being. My mother talked a great deal about Earth when I was a child. She said that the sky and the oceans were blue. Considering that Earth is over 70% ocean, I was intrigued by the notion of a planet that was overwhelmingly blue. The color was rare on Vulcan. Spock hesitated. When I first visited myself, I found that any descriptions, including hers, were not adequate to prepare me for direct observation. Spock! Jim's tone was incredulous, and Spock looked up from his work again to see Jim grinning at him. Are you saying you had an emotional reaction to your first encounter with our lovely blue marble? Spock had read enough of human space history to recognize the reference. Not an emotional reaction, Captain. An intellectual one. I'm sure, Jim smiled, and shot him a brief look, his eyes bright in the sunlight and blue as the Terran sky.
Symbolism! I definitely has to do with an emotional story involving my dead mother, and not at all you and your eyes.
Both.
Nope.
It can be both. It is Spock's connection to humanity via his mom and also his boyfriend.
Ugh.
And we can keep this going. Kirk's favorite color is green, not because of trees, but because Vulcan's blood is green. My interpretation is flawless and without fault.
And when Spock blushes,
he turns
green, not red.
Like a watermelon.
Love it so much.
Like the rind of a watermelon.
I love that quote so much, because when you're reading it, you're like, oh, this is kind of nice. We're getting to know more about Spock, and then aldora89 just slaps you in the face with that last sentence. Oh my god.
Emotions.
And it's little things like that. It never felt too heavy-handed, the romance in this fic. I don't think it ever, literally ever. Even the final, it just felt so natural.
Would you say they were delicate whiffs of scent in this romance? Like a pheromone almost that wafted up at night from a dangerous plant?
It kind of did, yeah.
I actually, one of the things that I really like about this fic is the fact that, okay, it's the best thing is the most frustrating thing, which is I haven't been able to find another one like it at all. Because this, I would say, is 80% action adventure, like a good old-fashioned, it's an away mission that goes wrong and they have to survive, and it's almost Gen in a lot of parts. And then 20% really well done, subtle, sweet romance. And, I haven't been able to find a whole lot of really good Gen, or even, Spurk, but the actual story itself doesn't focus on the Spurk. It's just, a mission. And it's tragic because I found this one and I'm like, yes, this is what I was looking for. And then that's it. That's all I can find.
That format sounds a lot like the kind of books I most enjoy to read, where if there is romance, it is a small, subtle, just aromatic paprika put on top of a delicious dish of action-adventure plot things. So, well done. Well done.
I mean, yeah, that's this fic. Like,
delicious
it's almost
paprika?
like... It's almost like falling asleep. It's just simple. It's easy for them, kind of.
Mm-hmm.
Like, obviously they have to go through their emotional bullshit around it because they're like, oh god, the ethics, and I can't fall in love with my captain, I can't fall in love with my first officer. There's a crazy amount of stuff going on right now, that kind of stuff. And then also Jim is contending with all of these memories that he just shouldn't have, and like Spock is contending with this whole like, oh my god, should I not be around Jim because every time I'm around him I become this crazed animal, and it's like these poor kids are dealing with a lot of stuff, but the falling in love part is like it's like as easy as breathing for them. It just comes naturally to them. They rail against it sometimes.
I was gonna say it's because they're besties.
That's why they're best friends at first.
It feels like the natural conclusion of a lot of their emotional arc, because this author sets it up so carefully that this is just who they are. This is a part of their being. They are in love. That's it. That is who they are. So you never really need it to be dramatic, I guess. There's enough other things going on.
There's no need for any dramatics to happen. Even at the end when there's just really good sex stuff. Really good alien human sex.
Okay, so they lean into Spock as an alien. Quick, we got to get back the porn lovers in the audience. They're bored by all this plot.
Before we do
How
that,
crazy.
Before they do that, again, just in case it squeaks anybody out or they're not a huge fan, a lot of the, I'm going to go with nuts and bolts of the relationship, the actual working it out and talking about it, is absolutely backloaded on this thing. So you can read up to 80% of it and there is no sex, there's no kissing, there's no discussion of romance. It's just floating in the background.
There's a Vulcan kiss. Jim dares Spock to kiss him.
Because they're 13-year-olds at summer camp.
Yeah, they're playing spin the bottle.
No, they play Truth or Dare, and Jim is like, I dare you to kiss me.
At summer camp.
Yeah. I mean, what is Jim but a 13-year-old who was given a real-life spaceship?
Fair.
Very true. But yeah, a good most of the fic is like subtle hints of romance, slowly falling in love, but then you don't really have to read the last couple chapters if you don't want to, kind of a situation. But the last couple chapters, if you are interested, are great. I think it's the best alien-human sex scenes I've ever read, because they get into they're different species, and it's not just like a double-ribbed cock situation, because that's a lot of what happens with Spock in a lot of explicit fic.
You have a list of all the different alien things people do to Spock's penis in fan fiction. I need it numbered on my desk by Monday.
Actually, I think there's I only know of 3 different dicks of Spock's.
That's still a lot I'm gonna put out there.
3 more dicks than Spock has in real life.
Maybe 4. I don't know. But so in this iteration, it's interesting. It's like two dicks entwined with each other.
Yeah, they lean
spiraling
into
with each other.
The xenobiology aspect of this.
And that's
Damn,
just
Amanda,
Spock.
you really went for it.
Yes. We learned things about Amanda Grayson that no one needed to know.
Well, Kirk really likes it. So
yeah, we also learned some things about Kirk, but we were there for that. I actually, again, maybe I'm very strange for this. I love the fact that at the very end, Kirk, I do not have a subtle bone in my body, decided that he was going to be subtle about his propositioning. Like, man, the one time in your life that you didn't just sidle up and ask.
He wants to be delicate. He loves him.
And then Spock's response to this was like, oh geez, I was waiting for you to make a move because I wasn't sure, like, what was his exact quote? Something along the lines of, like, I was beginning to doubt your affections. Like, that's Vulcan for, you took a really long time, man. I was waiting.
It is just so sweet. And what's really great about the sex scenes is that it's not PWP. It is straight up mostly plot. And then you get some of the most satisfying sex scenes because of all of the buildup, because of this intense situation they just went through. And they are dealing with the ramifications of that situation for like a while. And then they finally get involved with each other. And because of that involvement, they're kind of a little bit, it's easier for them to shoulder what happened to them. And it's exactly what you want with a long-form fic, in my opinion. Like, this is exactly the type of long-form fic that should be written. Mm-hmm. And I'm so happy it exists.
Instead of plot, what plot? It's porn? What porn? We don't have any porn. And they sequester it in the very end of the story to make you get through all the plot first.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, and it would have been really uncomfortable for them to do it on the planet that, like, there's
too much stuff happening there.
Yeah.
Their hierarchy of needs was very skewed at the time.
So,
yes.
This is probably just my classification, but there's a specific kind of story that I call it ends with porn. And it's a very
That's a good one.
It's a specific kind of fic where you could have a cheesy plot, it could be goofy, it could be tropey, it could be whatever. But basically, the author is like, what is the ending to this? And they have sex, fade to black. And that's the emotional culmination of the fic.
Feed.
And it feels goofy in a certain respect because it's just, ta-da, the end. And you're like, okay, cool.
Look, they don't allow you to end episodes like that on primetime television.
No.
Fanfiction writers need to exploit this.
But if they did...
that's how they all would end.
Yeah, it's sort of a little bit of a cop-out, and I say that it sounds really bad when I say it like that. I don't mean it like that. They're really fun to read sometimes, but this is not that, and I mean that in the very best of ways, where, yes, it does end with some porn in there, but it's tasteful. Like, it meant something emotionally, and then they took it that little half step further to really wrap up the emotional arc, so it didn't just feel like the whole thing had been building towards this one sex scene.
Most long and convoluted build up to a sex scene ever. There was giant bugs involved.
I will say that as someone who wants and enjoys sex, I am not necessarily asexual.
You are one of...
You're outnumbered here.
Yeah, you really are.
I think that the sex scenes were terribly important for this fic.
Yeah.
I think that that just in my opinion, obviously if you are asexual and you don't enjoy reading sex scenes, like that's okay. But for me, it felt like the author did a really good job of using the sex as a plot device, as a character building and plot device. It was really good.
I mean, it can be very important to certain characters, and so if it's done right,
yeah, it can.
It's a very emotional
and it was important to them
when their
It
dicks
was
are
important to them. It was also important to the audience, I think, as well. Like, we as an audience needed that for their love arc, their relationship arc.
We needed to see Spock's double helix dick for the emotional gratification.
Okay.
That was
double
just
helix
spice on top.
Double helix insinuates that there's space. There's no space between them.
So it's more like a barber pole?
Theoretically?
Yes. Aldora89 did a really good job describing his dick. Let's just put it that way.
I can't wait to get to that description. Just for that, I'm gonna read until I find that description of Spock's penis, and then close the fic and be like, amazing, well done, Aldora.
Yeah,
you
should.
You're going to
And then
miss out
text
on
me.
the last little bit, but okay.
You guys can tell me what happens then.
No, you should
I'll have
finish
read
it.
the
You
important
should finish
parts.
it. No, you should finish
All
it.
the
It's
plot,
really, really well done.
Spock's penis. Done.
Yeah, okay, that's fair.
But yeah, if the person who is listening to this has not read it, why did you listen to this right now?
I mean, to be fair, I
You need to
haven't.
read it before you. That's
but
true. That is actually true.
I don't care about
But
spoilers.
I hope
so.
you read it now. I hope you've listened to all of this and went, wow, that sounds really interesting.
Yes.
Good stuff.
Well, Miss Ampo, thank you so much for spicing this episode up a little bit, even though we didn't have any people email us.
Thank you for explaining the story I was supposed to write, Professor. I'll be sure to have my essay on your desk by Friday. Thank you for this extension.
You're welcome.
Yeah, you're welcome.
No, this was super fun.
Good. I'm happy that you were able to be a part of this episode because it was really fun being able to just explain it to somebody who didn't really know.
Yes.
You know?
It's fun to be
and to
explained
have a real-time response, which was great.
All my conversations about lizards.
These lizards are very important in this story.
They are. And I find that
literally
delightful.
Longclaw is the best character.
I believe it.
But if you want to find out what happens with her, you have to finish the story we're not telling you.
How could you?
Okay, I think that we are done. We will see you guys September 3rd. Until then, we will miss you, and it's been really fantastic. Thank you all for listening. Thank you.
Yeah.
Goodbye, guys. I'll see you in September. I won't see you until then. I'll be gone.
Yes, some point after September.
Then they'll let me back out of the basement.
Yes.
Eat your kibble.
Okay, back into my dungeon. Goodbye, listeners.
Goodbye. Thank you, Miss Ammo.
Yeah, so I guess we'll see y'all next season on
Fangirls Anonymous. Bye.